I am really excited today. I know what else is new, but I'm going to make something that I know how to do well, so there'll be no learning in the kitchen today. I'm just going to be teaching. And it is an adaptation of my OG crumb cake recipe, which is the first thing I shot in my studio here. I like how I call my kitchen my studio. But anyway, and that was my first video really in the kitchen, and I have adapted that recipe and I've made it into an apple crumb pie. And it's really a family favorite, so I'm excited to finally share it. 'Tis the season for apple pie, so here we go. How many apples do you use and what kind? Okay, for me, I'm not picky about the apples, and oftentimes I mix them up. I'll put maybe 2 McIntosh with 2 Red Delicious with a Honeycrisp or whatever. But I only have Honeycrisp today, and I actually love Honeycrisp apples. So I'm just gonna do all Honeycrisp. It's gonna be delicious, no issue. But I'm gonna share that I usually do, this is how I decide how many apples I'm gonna use. I put them into the pie dish because I just kind of like to have a sense of how many apples it's gonna take, because you got your bigger apples, you got your smaller apples, and you know, how can you say 6 apples is the right amount? So because these apples are kind of on the larger size, and I put them in here, I think 5 apples are gonna do it for today's pie. So that's what we're gonna go with. Now before I start peeling the apples, I have oftentimes made my own pie crust, and other times I just take the roll-out pie crusts and I just use those, and I'll save the how to make the pie crust for another episode. All right, I'm gonna peel. I will say that through the years, I have tried different apple peeling techniques, and one time I had an apple peeler, another time I had, you know, the apple corer, and I mean, I've kind of tried all the gadgets, and I just seem to just end up with the basics, like peeling my own apple, and it just kind of is nice, peaceful. I just take the time and I just do it by hand with my, look at this fancy knife I have for it. I like that knife. And I like to try and, you know, do where you can see if you can peel the whole thing without breaking the skin. Here we go. I am literally crazy. Can I do it? I don't know. Ugh. I've got my apples peeled, and I'm going to prepare the mixture for the apples. So it is simply 1/3 cup of sugar, a nice heaping third. I love the heapings. The heaping measurements are best for me. Then I have a heaping brown sugar that goes in, cornstarch, and what I do is it's about a regular tablespoon, a spoon. Okay, I can't even speak English. For the cornstarch, I just take a nice healthy tablespoon, like out of my silverware drawer, and push that in. And then I bring in all of my favorite Penzeys spices. So we'll start with some vanilla, and I'll just hit about 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla, just judging. A nice healthy amount of cinnamon. So I'm gonna say that's at least 1 teaspoon, maybe 1.5 teaspoons. Do you like how I measure? I'm gonna hit some nutmeg in there, just a few sprinkles of nutmeg, maybe 1/4 teaspoon. You can leave that out if you have people who are allergic to nuts. I have pumpkin pie spice here, which I think just adds a little something. So I do another maybe 1/8 teaspoon of that. And lastly, cloves. Now cloves are very strong, so I don't recommend doing a lot of cloves. If anything, 1/8 teaspoon, or just look how I'm doing it. A little sprinkle, just like that. Just to get the nice smell of cloves in there, but not have it be too overwhelming. And I stir this up nicely. It's such a great day right now, and I'm in such a good mood, so I don't know. Maybe it's because it smells like the holidays right now in this bowl. It's making me happy. It really smells good. Bringing out a big knife for this. Any knife will do. I just like working with the big one. So I'm gonna just slice them, and I'm gonna bring them over there and show you about the thickness. Oh, this is noisy. All right, let me just show you this. I really love my apples to be like paper thin, and that's why I take the time to slice. Like, look how many slices I got out of this one apple, because I just like it to be really like paper thin and delicate apples when I'm eating an apple pie. I don't really like big, thick, chunky apples, and that is my personal preference, and you can feel free to do it how you love it, but that's how I love it. Let me give you another look at how thin and how many apple slices I got out of that one apple. So really delicate and really nice. And in we go. I like to challenge myself to make them as paper thin as possible. And sometimes, literally, they're almost like see-through, but that's better than too thick. And then we'll give this a full stir, and then we'll get our crust ready. And sometimes they're so paper thin that they even break in the bowl, and I like that. So I encourage you to challenge yourself to the paper thin apple pie, and you'll never do another kind. So I've let my pie crusts get to room temperature so that they're easy to unroll, and we only need one for this recipe. So now that I have that olive oil sprayer, my 1 can of Pam has lasted me for like months, so I'm really happy about that. So I'm using it only for baking. And let's give our pan a spray, and now I'm going to unroll my crust. And I do enjoy making a pie crust, by the way. I just felt like for this video I should focus on the pie and not the crust. But so I've got my crust. I'm going to stretch it out in here nicely. And then I'm going to pinch. I like pinching, doing the little pinching on the sides to make it look, well, because it is homemade. I'm going to give it a few pokes with the fork just so that it doesn't like puff up underneath when it's baking. All right, so I have that ready. Now I will take my apples and I'm going to just add them right in to the pie crust. Hopefully there'll be a few extra that I can eat once I pour these in. I'm going to save myself one, but that's it. Now I like to make sure that the apples get evenly spread. A lot of people pile the apples in the middle of the pie, and then it gets really kind of difficult to lift your pie slices out. So if you spread your apples all the way to the edges and kind of flatten it on top so that they don't pile up in the middle, you get a more evenly dispersed apple situation in every slice. All right, that's how that looks. So it's nice and flat. It's not puffing up in the middle. It's flat and it's all the way pushed out to the sides. And now we will make the crumbs. I think I'm a little excited about this. What is wrong with me? For the crumbs, since it's just 1 9-inch pie, we're going to start with 1 stick of butter and soften it. While that's happening, I'm going to eat those apples that I shaved for myself. I love Honey Delicious apples so much. Oh my God. And now they're all dipped in cinnamon and sugar. Perfect. For crumbs, it is a good idea not to over soften the butter. So that is the best amount. You don't want it to be melted butter. Just want it to be softened. I probably went a little too far, but no worries. I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to start with 1/3 cup of nice heaping 1/3 cup of sugar again. And then we'll do 1/3 cup of the light brown sugar, a nice heaping 1/3, and a little dash of vanilla. Penzi should be a big sponsor of this episode. I've used every single Penzi spice. And cinnamon, a good amount of cinnamon, like that. I hope you enjoy my measuring techniques. All right, now we have a nice creamy base for our crumbs. Now we're going to take about 1.5 cups of flour. I'm going to roll my sleeves up for this so I don't get flour on this shirt. So we're going to start with a heaping cup, and then I'm going to judge a half, and I'm not going to pour it all in yet. I'm just going to do some. So I don't want to make my crumbs too dry, and I can tell by feel if they get too dry, and then they're hard. And if you don't put enough flour in, and the flour jumps out of the bowl, then the crumbs will be too mushy and they'll just melt into the cake. So there's definitely a fine line of crumb expertise that comes with time. You just try it a few ways and then you'll see what the feel is for the right crumbs. All right, that's the tricky part. So if I get my hands in this, that's when I'll know what I'm doing, if it's right. Yep, it already feels good. So if I add more flour, these crumbs are going to be way too dry. So let me show you up here what it looks like. So you want your crumbs to stick together, but then be able to break apart. Okay, you don't want them to be too dry so that they're all just like loose. They need to be able to hold together and then be able to break. All right, Listen, it's just trial and error, but if you practice it, you'll get it. It's not an exact science, and it's not about the exact. I know people think baking is a science and it has to be precise. That's not how I do my baking. And for me, it's by feel, okay? That's all I can say. That's just how I roll. All right, here we go. So now I'm going to crumb this up. And I want to make sure I hold some crumbs together so that they're big, chunky crumbs as well as small ones. Doing so far. So you see how I have some big ones that I'm holding together and then some crumblies that are filling in the holes. Crumblies is a scientific term that should be in the dictionary. Now you can, if you'd like to make an extra crummy pie, you can actually start with 1.5 sticks of butter and it will just fill it up even more. I feel that this is probably decadent enough. But, you know, on some occasions I might add that extra half a stick of butter and just a teens more flour, and you'd probably get a few more crumbs. But that looks pretty darn good. And I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees. This is going to go in for 30 to 40 minutes. And I'm just going to watch it, because what happens with an apple pie is you'll start to see the apples bubbling up throughout it. And then you know you're in good shape. This is going in. Here we go. If you can see, first of all, it's perfect, it's beautiful. And you can see on the corner there how the apple mixture, ooh, inside is kind of bubbling. Ooh, it's steamy. And it's kind of bubbled up. So that's how you really know when the apples are cooked, because they kind of start to bubble through the crumbs. Oh, it's spectacular. It smells so good. When I bake anything with crumbs, I forgot to mention this in my crumb cake episode, I always, when it cools off usually, I finish it off with powdered sugar. So, I mean, just so you can see what it's going to look like. And I'll probably do it again because this powder will probably melt right in. But when it's cooled off and I powder it, oh, it is just a thing of beauty. And let me show you what it looks like with the powdered sugar on it. Up close. Look how pretty that is. It is perfect and it smells so good. I'm so excited. And so I'm going to let it cool a little, and then I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to show you what it looks like inside. Okay, it is officially cool enough for me to cut now, I hope. And good news for my neighbors, because we can't eat all this ourselves. I'll be bringing some over to them, so they're going to get to enjoy it. But first, I am going to find the crummiest part, and I'm going to cut myself a slice. I probably should have waited a bit longer, because I feel like it's still too hot inside, but whatever. We're going for it. Oh yes, that looks so good. All right, I didn't wait long enough, unfortunately, but you can take a peek. It's apple crumb deliciousness, and it's still steaming hot, so that's why it kind of fell a little loose, but hey, it's gonna taste just as good. And when that cools off and it coagulates, it's gonna be amazing. Here we go. Oh my God. Tastes like Christmas.